some of the most emotionally intelligent people you know did not learn those skills by reading books, nor by taking courses, nor by watching personal development content. They developed them because they had no other option. They grew up in environments where understanding what was happening around them was not an advantage, it was a necessity. It was not about being perceptive, it was about anticipating conflicts, about reading minimal changes in others' behavior, about detecting tensions before they exploded. While others could afford to ignore the environment, they could not. Their brain trained itself to survive in scenarios where failing to read emotions had real consequences. And that, over time, creates something many do not understand, a different kind of intelligence, one that does not come from academic knowledge, but from the constant experience of adaptation. When you grow up in an unpredictable environment, your brain does not develop like that of someone who grew up in stability. It trains differently. It begins to build patterns that for others simply do not exist. What for one person is an irrelevant detail, for you can be a clear signal that something is changing. It is not exaggeration, it is calibration. You begin to notice minimal variations in tone of voice, subtle differences between a comfortable silence and one loaded with tension, looks that last a little longer than normal, gestures that do not match the words. And it is not something you decide to learn consciously. You do not sit down one day to practice it. It installs itself in your system because you need it. It is as if your mind were constantly in the background analyzing everything, connecting dots, anticipating possible scenarios before they happen. Over time, this stops being an effort and becomes automatic. You can enter a place and in a matter of seconds feel the atmosphere without anyone telling you anything. You can talk to someone and detect that there is something they're not saying, even if their words sound correct. And this is where many get confused. They think it is intuition, as if it were something mystical or inexplicable. But it is not. It is fast processing. It is accumulated experience. It is a brain that has been trained for years not to fail in reading context, because failing was not a safe option. That same adaptation is what explains why many of these people develop an empathy that, from the outside, seems exaggerated or even unreal. It is not just about understanding what someone says. Anyone can do that. It's about understanding what someone is feeling even when they try to hide it, even when that person is not even fully aware of it. You can perceive discomfort behind a well-constructed smile, insecurity behind a confident attitude, tension behind words that in theory are neutral. And this does not come from a romantic or idealistic place. It is not, I am very empathetic because I am a good person. It comes from having to interpret complex emotions from a very early age, from having learned that what someone shows does not always match what is really happening. And of course, all of this does not come alone. It mixes with an almost inevitable tendency, over-analysis. Because when your mind has been trained to detect risks, it does not have an easy off switch. You end up reviewing conversations after they end, reconstructing scenes in your head, looking for hidden meanings, wondering if something you said or someone else said had a second intention. Sometimes that analysis gives you clarity. It allows you to understand people better and make smarter decisions. But other times it turns into noise, into mental exhaustion, into an overload you do not know how to stop. In both cases, the origin is the same, a mind designed to anticipate rather than react.
Now, there is a part of this story that almost no one wants to touch because it is not so inspiring, and that is the real cost of living this way. Because yes, you can read people with a precision many would envy, but that does not mean you live calmly. In fact, many times the opposite happens. That constant hyper-observation makes disconnecting not something natural. Even when everything seems to be fine, your mind keeps working as if something could change at any moment. You evaluate, interpret, adjust, and that, sustained over time, generates fatigue. Not a physical fatigue, but a mental one. That feeling of being on more hours than you would like, of not being able to simply be without analyzing. Added to this is another key point, the difficulty in trusting. Because when you get used to detecting inconsistencies, to noticing when something does not add up, trusting blindly feels almost irresponsible. It is not that you do not want to connect with others. It is not that you do not care about people. It is that your system is designed to protect you first. And that protection, although useful in certain contexts, also limits the way you relate. It makes you more selective, more reserved, slower to open up. Over time, this entire process builds a self-sufficiency that from the outside looks admirable. You get used to figuring things out, to adapting, to not depending too much on anyone. You learn to sustain yourself, to find solutions, to move forward even when you do not have all the conditions in your favor. And yes, that is a real strength, but like almost everything in this context, it also has a double edge. Because when your system gets used to not needing anyone, allowing someone in, letting someone help you, or letting someone see you in a vulnerable moment feels uncomfortable, even dangerous. Not because it actually is, but because it goes against everything you have learned. However, when these people manage to break that barrier and trust, they do it in a way that is not common. They do not build superficial relationships or half connections. They build deep, intense bonds where there is a real understanding of the other. It is as if all that ability to read, to analyze, to understand emotions, which previously served mainly to protect, transforms into a tool to connect, but only with those who manage to pass through that filter that not everyone gets through. This is where the shift in perspective comes that separates those who remain trapped in the past from those who truly evolve. All these characteristics that you might be seeing as problems are actually adaptations. They are not system errors, they are intelligent responses to a demanding environment. Your brain did exactly what it had to do to function under the conditions it had. And when you understand that, you stop fighting yourself for being too sensitive, too analytical, or too intense. You begin to see it for what it is, a different configuration. And beyond that, there is something that is being studied more and more, post-traumatic growth. The idea that you can not only survive difficult experiences, but that you can develop from them a deeper way of understanding life. People who go through this and manage to process it usually see patterns where others see chaos, understand human dynamics with a clarity that is not taught in any course, and develop a perception that, when used well, becomes a brutal advantage in many aspects of life.
In the end, all of this leads you to a question that is uncomfortable but necessary. If you have this way of perceiving the world, if you analyze more than normal, if you feel more than you would sometimes like, it is not a coincidence. It is the direct result of what you lived through and how your brain adapted to it. But understanding the origin does not change the result by itself. You can stay in that automatic mode, reacting, protecting yourself, anticipating everything as if you were still in the same environment as before. Or you can start to take control of that ability, use it consciously, turn that hyper-observation into strategy, that empathy into real connection, that analysis into smarter decision-making. Because in the end, yes, all of this was born from the need to survive, but what you do with it now no longer depends on what happened. It depends on you. And that is where the story stops being about what you lived and starts being about what you build with it. So if you feel that you perceive too much, that you analyze too much, that you feel too much, it is not a coincidence. It is not that you're exaggerating, it is that your brain was shaped in an environment where understanding more than others was not an advantage, it was a way to protect yourself. It is the result of a mind that learned quickly, that adapted before having time to question it, that sharpened its senses because it had no other option. And yes, that gave you tools that others do not have, but it also left you with patterns that, if you do not see them, continue to operate as if you were still in that same context. That is why the question is not why you are like this. You already know that one. The real question is what you are going to do with it now. If this video made sense to you, give it a like and subscribe to the channel, because here you are not going to find pretty phrases. You are going to find things that force you to understand yourself better. And if you want to go deeper, turn on the bell, because what is coming is not content to pass the time, it is content that changes the way you see everything.